It's an elephant. It's an elephant. But if I'd had a stuffed Dumbo, I probably would have used that. But I'm talking about a giant elephant today, so I figured the elephant Beanie Baby was applicable. So, time to start on Zoe. Zoe's got a couple of different components to it. This first video is going to be about Zoe as the country / Zunesha as like the giant elephant that it's on the back of and everything, along with the history involved with both of those things, because they do overlap, because while Zunesha is a living thing, and of course Zoe as the country is dependent upon Zunesha and everything, and going over some of that history and everything like that. Also, I'll probably touch on a couple of the theories that I think that we have at the moment for like stuff involving Zunesha. So, and of course I have Brenda in the background, but she's not all that interested in what I'm talking about right now. So, oh well. So first up, in regards to Zunesha, or the Mokomo Dukedom, or country of Zoe, however you want to put it, the Phantom Isle, the Wandering Isle, for what Zunesha is also called at various points. So the domain itself is referred to as the Mokomo Dukedom, because instead of them having like a king or a queen or something, they have a dukedom. Which is of course something that is actually in our world. There are different countries within, or different areas within countries that are a dukedom. They're not as prevalent as they used to be, but they are still to a degree around in that regard. And kind of the background that we have is that at one point the Mink tribe, which are the citizens of the Mokomo Dukedom, them as a society ended up living on the back of Zunesha and forming the country of Zoe, the moving island. So there's lots of different names that it kind of goes by in regards to like what context you're referring to as. The citizens are called Minks. The country of itself is kind of called the Mokomo Dukedom. The island is Zoe, and the thing that it's on the back of is Zunesha. So it's like this, like, it's like okay, so it would be the Mokomo Dukedom within the country of Zoe, how'd that be? It'd be like the Mink tribe residing within the Mokomo Dukedom on the island of Zoe, that is Zunesha. So it's like this 4-tiered thing in that regard. And then of course within the country itself they have these other different areas where they live and stuff like that, but I haven't really gone into too much of that in other countries, so I'm not really going to worry about that in this one. But they have like different areas where they live based around, like, I live closer to the back leg or the front leg, or the the one leg or the other, or the center, or however it ends up going. When we are introduced to the country, of course it has two rulers. It has Inarashi as the as the ruler of the day, and Nekomamushi as the ruler of the night. And then of course prior to that they had a different leader, who was gonna mispronounce this guy. It's Hitsugi Sukan. He's like this sheep-looking mink that is the previous ruler before Inarashi and Nekomamushi, Inu and Neko, who is in charge when they are children, and who is there when Odin and Roger visit the island 20-some years ago. Is when that happens. I'll talk a little bit about him, but we don't know that much information about him. And of course, the minks themselves are a race of humanoids with furry mammalian features that live within the Mokomo Dukedom, and they have resided within this civilization for about 1,000 years. So them as a civilization does predate the Void Century, and them as a country, again, predates the Void Century. So But they were also very isolated from the rest of the world after everything happened in the Void Century. But they still lost a lot of that knowledge in regards to stuff within the outside world. So, and I will get to more of like Zoe being this wandering island, why Zunesha is wandering around. I'll get to that in a few minutes. But in regards to the name of it, so the name for where Mokomo comes from is it's the dukedom is likely a pun on Mokomoko, which is basically like means like fluffy in Japanese, and of course their citizens are covered in fur and everything like that. And of course, in regards to the culture of Zoe, they of course, as opposed to other countries, their ruler is a duke, and their line of succession is not decided by bloodline; it's decided by merit, because neither Neko nor Inarashi are related to the previous duke, as far as we are aware. They're not related to each other either. I know there are theories that like maybe Inarashi and Nekomamushi are supposed to be like brothers or something, and if they had the same birthday, I would think that would be a little more likely. But they don't, so they're just like childhood friends. And given how long they were with Odin and with the rest of the scabbards and everything like that, something about them being brothers, beyond just like brothers in arms, would have been brought up, I would assume. Would have been mentioned. And of course, within the main culture, we know that like the merfolk and the fishmen, that they are able to have, regardless of what like the parents look like, the children can look like any different number of species as long as it is mammalian. And as is pointed out, the female minks tend to look a bit more humanoid, just with like fur and slight animal features like we see with Wanda and Carrot and Tristan, and Milky, the deer that Chopper is infatuated with, where we see them. But the male minks tend to have a much more diversity in regards to how they look. Some of them can look somewhat humanoid. Other ones look much more based on their animal forms. Like Inu and Neko look very, much more animalistic in those regards. Same thing with like, Miyagi just looks like a goat that's like standing up, type of stuff like that, which is not a problem. I was trying to think if we've seen any other female minks that look a little bit more on the animalistic side. I think we see a little bit of those every now and then, more in the background. They're not the more prominent ones, as I mentioned with Carrot and Wanda and stuff. And Pedro is fairly humanoid looking, or was fairly humanoid looking. Same thing with like Cecilia and a few of the other male minks that we have interacted with. Other ones are very different looking and everything like that. And it's very interesting to see like Oda's just kind of like, I want to have fun with this. And it's a way of having like human animal hybrid type things, or humanoid animals that are not devil fruit users, that aren't just like someone who ate a zone and they just like kind of permanently stay in their hybrid form, kind of the way that like Chopper does. Or even to a degree like we see like, Jack pull off later on in Wano and things like that. There's, it's a way of doing that. It's kind of like when he did like the Island of Rare Animals with like, with like Gaimon. It's, he just wanted to draw weird animals and a dude trapped in a chest. So there's like, that's kind of like a, kind of like why that's there a little bit. Plus it is kind of interesting to see, all these different character designs. And of course they have the Sulong that is involved in what they are able to do. In regards to part of their power structure is of course a Sulong, and we learn that that's something that they have to learn how to control as they grow up, and they practice by activating it different points in time, when the moon is out, and they're able to train with it in like a safe spot, I would assume. Inu and Neko have very, very good control over their Sulong forms. We see this during their fight with Jack and Kaido and everything like that up on the roof. Whereas with Carrot, the first time she transforms, while she to a degree has a fair amount of control over it, it is still something that she had to be like very careful with, and it did very much drain her by the time she got back to the Sunny after like taking out Daifuku's fleet that was coming after them. And even like later on when we see Wanda and Carrot using their Sulong forms against against Perospero. I still think I would have liked it if they were the ones to actually fully take down Perospero instead of having it be Nekomamushi. Not that I have a problem with Nekomamushi being the one to take out Perospero. I just would have liked it if it could have shown Wanda and Carrot doing a lot more damage to Perospero, given the fact that both Wanda and Carrot had very close relationships with Pedro, that them being able to be the ones to like take out, or at the very least cause a lot more physical damage to Perospero would have been nice in my opinion. Before Nekomamushi had to come along and get him and finish him off. I do hope Perospero's dead. Some of the Charlotte siblings I like more than others, and Perospero is one of the ones I don't really care that much for. I mean, his devil fruit's nice, but I just don't care that much for Perospero to begin with. It's the tongue. It's the creepy tongue. That's just. Ugh. But so we see a lot of that. We know that their culture is kind of very similar to humans. Their dress is very similar to humans. I would assume that they've been able to get, newspapers and stuff like that over the years, because it's not like the news crews couldn't find them. They probably can, and I would think Neko and Inarashi would be interested in trying to make sure that they know what's going on outside of Zoe to the best of their knowledge. And of course we know that Pedro and Pecoms and such, and Zeppo, that they left to go on different missions and everything like that to go out into the world and explore it and try to learn about the poneglyphs and everything, and that of course led to bad things, unfortunately. So there's a lot of different connections there. We know that Inarashi and Nekomamushi are the rulers, that Inarashi rules from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. As the ruler of the day, and then him and like the daytime citizens all just kind of like fall asleep, and then Nekomamushi rules from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. as the ruler of the night. And then of course their habitat, the citizens wake up and everything like that, so it's like 12-hour shifts that they're on. But barring there being like an enemy attack, as we see happen with Zoe, when Jack shows up, most of the time they're just kind of dealing with matters of the townsfolk, making sure that everybody has the food they need, making sure that there's no issues going on between the townsfolk and the forest folk and the nocturnal folks and everything like that, going back and forth, and being able to keep track of that type of stuff. We of course know that a good portion of the way that they tend to get their food on Zoe is because Zunesha sucks up water and then with its trunk, and then throws it over the back to where it like rains down onto the back of the island, and that drops fish and other things like that they are then able to harvest, and it kind of waters the plants. I would assume they also have a way of getting like fresh water, because like that seawater that's getting thrown out there, and seawater isn't necessarily the best stuff to drink. So I think they do have like purification systems that they're able to use to like purify the water, so that way it's not salty water, and that way they can actually drink it. I would think that would be something that they would have developed at some point over the last 1,000 years or so while living on the back of an elephant. Plus also if it rains and stuff like that, they would be able to get they'd be able to get water from that and everything like that, and probably save it up. We also see that Raizo gathers up a bunch of the water. One of the times when Zunesha is like bathing itself, that Raizo gathers up a ton of that water to be able to use later on, and we saw him the payoff for that in Onigashima when he releases all the water with Jinbei's help. So we have that, and then of course within the structure of this, they also have the Guardians, and they also have the Musketeers. So Inarashi has the Musketeers, which are kind of like the Guardians during the day, and then of course Nekomamushi's kind of military setup are the Guardians, and they are led by Pedro. And we also have, I believe it's Wanda and Carrot are the they're called Kingsbirds, so they're the ones that can go back and forth between, the Guardians and the Musketeers to like deliver messages from Inarashi and Nekomamushi to each other, to make sure that there is a good way of communication, because there's a little bit of a rivalry between, of course, the Guardians and the Musketeers. There's a bit of a rivalry, and then of course we know that, for Inarashi and Nekomamushi, there's that big rivalry there, because of everything that happened at Wano, and of course they start to blame each other for thinking that, like, oh, maybe you were the traitor that, betrayed Lord Odin and everything like that, but they couldn't prove it. And of course they had to have at least worked together long enough to get back to Zou, after they escaped Wano. So we have that, but there's not really, Wano and Carrot were like the go-betweens, and they had like very good relationships with both Inarashi and Nekomamushi, so I like that. And of course, within the Zou culture, there is, of course, physical affection is something that they do a lot. They do that, the guard shoe with, rubbing up against you and nuzzling and everything like that. That's kind of the ways that they show affection. We also see that they tend to be very connected with some of their animal instincts and everything like that, with, being very protective of food, but also like Wanda and a bunch of the other canine ones liking to chew on Brooke. It's like, oh, he's so nice to chew on him. Like, okay, glad I'm not a skeleton. So we kind of have that connection there, and of course Sanji just takes full advantage of this with getting like nuzzled by so many of them, so many of the females throughout the day and everything like that. Nami and Chopper are much more, open to getting like nuzzled by like men or women, the males or the females. So there's that. And of course, so there's just like all those fun instances there. Going more into Zou in regards to Zunesha in this regard. So Zou is, of course, the island that is located on the back of and I'm going to frickin' mispronounce Zunesha's species name, and I apologize. Neotamine Norita elephant. I apologize. I just refer to them as Zunesha species because I can't pronounce the dang name. And it is, this giant elephant that roams around the New World. I don't remember if we ever find out if Zou like wanders further into the Calm Belt and into either the two blues that would border the New World on the other side of the Calm Belt. I don't know if Zunesha ever wanders that far or not. And like how much Zunesha wanders, we don't know if there's like a certain path that it wanders on to keep it within a certain area. We know that minks have an innate ability to be able to like find their way to Zou, because we see this with Beppo, because when Law leaves the Heart Pirates, he sends them off, and Beppo takes them to Zou. That's where Law tells him to take them, because Beppo can find his way to Zou, can navigate his way to Zou, via like an internal, like how birds can like always determine like which way is north and different things like that. So they know which way they need to go to keep flying to get to their destination. Beppo and other minks can do the same thing when it comes to being able to locate Zunesha, no matter where they are in the world. And so Zunesha would like wander around, and of course it's wandering around and becomes known as the Phantom Island, because log posts are unable to pinpoint it. And that means that it's just even harder for like humans to be able to find it, for like the Marines to be able to find it or something like that, without having something else like the Vivre card that we know that Jack ends up having for I was about to say Kawamatsu, that's wrong, for Kanjuro, that they have that, and that's how they're able to get their way to Zou. So Vivre cards would be able to help you get there, because that's how Luffy's group with Law gets to Zunesha after they leave Dressrosa, is because they have Beppo's Vivre card that Law is able to use to help them get to Zou. So kind of basically the history that we have is that Zou became the home of the Mink tribe about 1,000 years ago. And at some point within the 1,000 years, the minks, beyond just like living on the back of it, developed it into this actual country that became the Mokomo Dukedom on top of Zo on Zunesha's back. We know that at some point during that time frame, um, 800, 900 years ago during the Void Century, that Zunesha was an ally of Joy Boy, and that the minks were an ally of Joy Boy during that time frame. And this eventually ended up resulting in, of course, the loss of the Great Kingdom. There's so many theories about like what the Great Kingdom actually was. I kind of am we know that it was more futuristic now based on what we learned at Egghead, but I kind of like to think that it's the island itself, or like the kingdom itself, may have been very futuristic and everything, but it was also very open-minded and had lots of these different cultures involved in it. Like it had minks, and it had giants, and it had the predecessors to the Kuja, and it had fishmen, and it had long arms and long legs and snake necks and three-eyed tribes and stuff like that, and humans, and like buccaneers and everything like that, like all of them living together within the same country, within the same kingdom of the Great Kingdom. And something about that made certain kingdoms very uncomfortable, and that led them to, of course, wanting to destroy the Great Kingdom. And some of it may have been a part of an uprising by led an uprising by like Nerona Eam himself, or themselves, and then like the Gorosei, or who the ones who became the 20 kings following Eam at the time, leading them and leading those countries together to form the world government and to form this coalition to like defeat the the Great Kingdom, and somehow being able to do that with, I'm quite certain, is some type of an outside force coming into play. Either Eam themselves as some type of like a god or a demigod or something like that had some type of like additional power ahead of time, and that led to something, and that's why that's why all the other kings followed him and everything like that. So there's that. And of course this eventually led to the defeat of the Great Kingdom, and their allies kind of being scattered and kind of losing some of that knowledge, and of course the world government just destroying so much of the knowledge, and even having parts of it being passed down by oral history wouldn't always work very well, because certain ones could get it wrong, certain ones could get corrupted, certain ones could just choose not to pass it on. The will of D gets passed on, but sometimes not always the right stories get passed down. That type of stuff, and that just like led to various other things where eventually those lines kind of either died out, or they've ended up in other families or stuff like that. But eventually, what ended up happening is that Zunesha is forced to wander, without any destination for the next, 800-ish years, because of a crime it committed, because of this unspeakable crime that it committed. And of course this leads to eventually just becoming the Phantom Island, because if it hadn't been forced to wander, then it probably would have stayed near Wano or near other allies of Joy Boys at that point in time, but it's forced to wander instead. And I know there's like the theory in regards to like Gear 5th and Nika like maybe creating Zunesha as like this giant elephant with like the really long legs, so that way it could wander around. Hence, this is the closest thing I have to a shirt with an elephant on it is a mammoth. This is for a Moral Hall. It's one of our it's like our Nebraska State Historical Museum, or a geological historical museum. And so Zunesha wandered and wandered and wandered, and it seemed the only one that it can take orders from at the moment is now Momonosuke. It would be interesting to see if Hiyori could hear the voice, since Hiyori hasn't really been exposed to Zunesha yet. It would be interesting to see if Hiyori would be able to like connect with Zunesha as well. But her having the voice of all things on top of Momonosuke having the voice of all things, maybe not. And of course, Zo wandered. They also had this pact with the Kozuki clan because they kept one of the poneglyphs. They were given one of the road poneglyphs by either Joy Boy's followers, who had like scattered the poneglyphs to different points of the world and gave the minx one to protect, and they protect it within the whale tree, and that's where it's been for the past 800 years. And the minx themselves know what it is, or at least Inuarashi and Nekomamushi ended up learning what they were from Odin, when Odin, saw it and everything like that, based on what they had learned by traveling with Odin and Roger and stuff. So they were able to then pass that information down to the Straw Hats and to Robin. So then Robin is now able to start looking and, getting all of the other poneglyphs that she's going to need to find their way to Laugh-Tale. But the minks have done an incredible job of protecting it, and I have a whole video where I talked about just like the amount of loyalty that the minks have shown to the Kozuki clan and to those who have proven their loyalty to the minks. I have a whole video where I talk about that whole discussion there. And I'll touch on it bits here and bits when I talk about Inu and Neko and everything like that in their own separate videos. So for hundreds of years, they passed down this information that they were connected to the Kozuki clan. And eventually, when Inuarashi and Nekomamushi are little kids, they, of course, are given this information, and they're like, okay, well, we're going to go out and we're going to find Wano. And that's about 32 years ago that they leave Zo, and they end up finding their way to Wano. They are successful in making their way to Wano. And for, two young kids climbing up the waterfall with all the fish and everything and getting into Wano. And then, of course, they are found, and everything happens there with the townsfolk and Odin and everything like that. And I'll get to that more when I talk about Inu and Neko in, subsequent videos. Eventually, when about 28 years ago, when the sheep guy, Hitsugen, when Odin and Roger show up at Zo, they have a letter from Inuarashi and Nekomamushi, and they give it to the Duke at the time, and he's like, oh, well, I'm so happy that they're okay. I appreciate you for bringing this information to me, and you are a member of the Kozuki clan and everything, and let me show you, the poneglyph and everything like that that's in the whale forest. So they get to see the poneglyph, and then they leave. Also, Odin is completely creeped out by the fact that the island is talking to him, which is just very funny. So he's just like completely freaked out by that, creeped out by that before they leave. And of course they interact with, Pedro and everything like that. Then 20 years ago, after Odin's execution, Inuarashi and Nekomamushi show up at Zo. After they manage to escape Wano, they show up at Zo, and eventually they end up becoming the rulers of the day and the night. And they're, because they have proven how strong they are, and there's probably some form of like competition that happens when like maybe the current Duke is getting to the point where he doesn't feel like where the Duke or Duchess at the time is like, I don't really think I'm going to be very able to carry out my duties very much longer, particularly when it comes to like, the fighting side of things. And it's like, okay, we're going to need to start looking to find new candidates for this position. And then they go through, and there's probably like some type of a competition that happens where you can, sign up to be a part of the competition and go from there. Or they may have just chosen Inuarashi and Nekomamushi because of the fact of like they'd been out in the world for a good chunk of time and had seen so many different things and learned so much about the outside world. And I mean, when they were learning to be vassals for Odin, when they were learning to be his retainers, they learned a lot of stuff that way too. So they were like educated in that regard. And eventually that would lead to they're the ones that became the rulers of the day and the night, as I mentioned. Eventually, just before, just a little while before the Straw Hats show up at Zo, so just a little under 2 years ago or so at this point in time, or a little over 2 years ago at this point, not 2 years ago, a couple of months ago at this point in time, is of course when, Raizo ends up on Zo, and, eventually it is, he's welcome to Zo, and then when Jack shows up, the minks tie him up in the whale forest, and leave him food and water, to keep him safe, and they keep denying that they have any idea who Raizo is or anything like that. And of course, we see that, that dedication there to A, protecting their citizens, B, protecting Raizo, and not being willing, not wanting to betray a friend and everything like that. And of course, the law, the Heart Pirates had showed up there at one point in time as well during that time frame, and they kind of tried to help protect, the citizens from Jack. And of course, Jack shows up, and he's, with his beast pirates, and they cause just so much damage to Zoe and everything, and to the citizens. And they take Nekomamushi's arm and Inarashi's leg, and cause so much damage with the poison gas from Caesar and all of that. And they're, cause so many problems there. And of course, eventually this does lead to where Nami and her group with Sanji and Brook and Chopper and Momonosuke show up at Zoe, and they are able to take out the remaining men from Jack's crew that were there, take them out and get them, sent flying or whatever, washed off the back of the elephant, whatever the case may be, since they're Smile users. And deal with them, and then of course administer treatment to the rest of the citizens to get them all better and everything like that. And of course, Chopper takes that very seriously, and they keep denying that they know who Raizo is. And I go much more detail into this in the other video, the Loyalty of the Minx video, because it is very loyal. And during that time frame, they help them and get them all better and everything. And eventually, it is revealed that Nami and Luffy, Nami's group, they learn about some of this stuff, and they learn, this is, Wanda and Carrot, and they develop friendships with them. Wanda actually attacks Nami when they first show up, thinking that they're there to attack them as well, and they're able to, calm them down, and, they actually end up helping, of course, and this, the Minx are very, very grateful to them and everything like that, and make them heroes, which it's, Nami and the crew are just doing the right things. These are people that they found that are in danger and in trouble, and that's just the way they are. They're going to help them regardless of what it might be personal cost to them. And they go through that, and then eventually it is, Peckham shows up with Beiji, and it's revealed that the Minx kind of have this slight alliance with the Big Mom Pirates because of Peckham's, and there are Minx that live on, within Totland, on some of the different islands and everything like that, that there is that connection there. Although, and this is something that is pointed out, Big Mom's, none of her children seem to be Minx, seem to be a Mink-human hybrid. The one that is a possibility is Malaise, but we only have sketch art of her, and she does have antlers. Whether or not she is part mink, and those are just antlers from being part mink, is a bit left up for debate. Or those are just something that she chooses to wear as a headpiece, is also up for debate. But in regards to, Peckham shows up with Beiji, and they're there to take Sanji / Caesar and take both of them. And of course, Peckham is exceedingly grateful to the Straw Hats for protecting his island. He's willing to just let it go and not have them take, Sanji with them. And of course, this leads to, Beiji shooting Peckham's and everything like that. Which there's not really any other place in these videos where I'd be able to mention that, because I don't plan on doing a Beiji video, and I don't plan on doing a Peckham's video at this point in time, unless Beiji becomes the king of something. Beiji's just going to become the next king of the pirates. That's the one who's on the way to help Luffy. I don't know. No. By the time this video goes up, we will know who are the ones hopefully on the way to help Luffy. But eventually what ends up happening is, of course, Peckham's is injured, and, Beiji leaves with Sanji and Caesar and takes them away. Eventually, Luffy and the rest of the crew, along with Law and Kinemon and Kanjuro, make their way to Zoe, where they are eventually all reunited. And of course, Luffy and the others are now given this other information about what's going on at Zoe, as they fill the others in on what happened at Dressrosa and everything. And so a lot of that information comes out, so they're able to explain a lot of that, and learn about Zoe and everything like that. And we get the flashbacks to explain it. And eventually, when Kanjuro and Kinemon make their way up to the top, where they are finally able to interact with the minks, we have this whole very tense situation where they think that, oh, the minks are going to be angry if they're talking about samurais and Raizo and everything like that, and that's why they haven't been mentioning them. And they're like, oh no, we have to prevent this from happening. But of course, Kinemon is just like, I am here looking for a ninja named Raizo, and I represent the Kozuki clan of Wano and everything like that. And there's this instant shift in Inarashi and Nekomamushi, and they just like shift to the point where they're like, yes, Raizo is safe, and they have that whole moment there, which I just love how that's done in the manga and how that's done in the anime and everything, with how they draw it out a little bit in the anime. That's one of those moments where it's like, I'm okay if they draw this out a tiny little bit here and have like just the right music cues and everything. Perfectly welcome. So they are able to, they find out that Raizo is safe and all of that, and Neku and Ino are reunited with, Kinemon and Kanjuro and Raizo and all of that stuff, so they're able to start up that and like get reunited with Momonosuke and everything like that, because it's been 20 years since they've seen him, and all of that. So we get all of that information where they're able to reveal all of this, and of course this is where they reveal that, oh yes, this is the road poneglyph, Raizo is fine, here's the whale forest, not necessarily in opposite order of that, and yes, we will help with this, with the ninja pirate mink samurai alliance and everything like that, where they will form that alliance with the Straw Hats and the Heart Pirates and stuff. And of course, so we have all of that coming into play, and then of course the minks, kind of the history for Zunesha at this point in time is, of course, when Jack shows back up again and tries to attack, this is when Momonosuke is able to start hearing Zunesha's voice. Luffy could hear it too, because he has the voice of all things, but Momo is the only one that can actually respond to the voice. And we see Momo, being, ordering Zunesha around to like fight back against Jack, and like sinks Jack's fleet, by like backhanding it and everything. And then they have to like, fix up Zunesha's leg where, Jack ended up injuring it with the cannonballs and everything. And then kind of the next major thing that we get is when Zunesha shows up at the raid on Onigashima, because like shows up outside of the borders of Wano, that Momonosuke is able to hear it and communicate with Zunesha again, because through their connection, and is able to get information and everything like that, and learn that Joy Boy has returned. They hear the drums of liberation, that moment there, which was very impactful in that regard, in regards to what that means for the series, with Luffy finally getting his full power as Nika, and Zunesha kind of giving Momo some of that other information and everything in that regard. And eventually, Zunesha asks Momo if they want to release Pluton, and it's revealed that the way that they would release Pluton is literally by breaking down, destroying the borders that are around Wano, and releasing all of that water. And then I guess that would mean like the island at the top would like fall, but they don't want to do that. They don't want to destroy Wano after everything that's happened to it so far. But so Zunesha has that, would have the ability to do that, I would assume, for trying to get Pluton out of there. But what ends up happening is, of course, Momo decides not to do that, and Zunesha ends up actually like wandering off again. We know that eventually a bunch of the minks return to Zunesha, because Inarashi and Nekomamushi decide to appoint Carrot as the next ruler of of Zou, that she's going to be the Duchess of Zou, and they themselves are going to remain in Wano as advisors to Momonosuke, but also to help with protecting the country should another threat arise, like another admiral show up or something like that. And if Akainu shows up, or if Aramaki tries to show up again or something like that, and Carrot is now the one that will be in charge of Wano. or not in charge of Wano. Yeah, Carrot's in charge of Wano now. There's a big plot spoiler, the big plot twist that happens. So, Carrot's in charge of Zoe at this point in time. She is the Duchess of the Mokomo Dukedom. And she will, of course, have Wanda and Sicilian and a bunch of the others there as advisors to her to make sure that she's trying to make the correct decisions for Wano, because she's the one that has the most outside experience with interacting with the outside world, and because of her traveling with the Straw Hats and everything like that. And Carrot will get her own video in this series. I have decided that I will have separate videos for Inarashi and Nekomamushi. A little bit of trivia about Zoe. Zoe, Z-O, with the little thing over the top of it, is actually just like the elephant. Just means elephant in Japanese. And everything. And according to One Piece Ruabu, which was this booklet about, or this book about like different countries that the countries in One Piece are based off of, Zoe is based off of Yemen. And of course the island itself is based off of the myth of the Sanatani, or the Hindu myth of the world residing on the backs of 4 elephants, where it's like the world is held up by like 4 elephants. And so it's like it's a base off of that. And I love how Oda does that with like, I want to have a country kind of moves around. How are you gonna do that? It could be in the sky. No, it's not a sky island. It's gonna be on the back of a giant elephant, and all the citizens are gonna be animals. But the females are gonna be sexy animals, and one of them is a rabbit. It's just like the editors. Okay, how you gonna pull that off? Oda, just sit back and watch, and all of that. Oh, and the cat leader is gonna be based off of Garfield because he'll like lasagna. Just like all that fun stuff. So that's what we have there for like the history of Zoe / Zunesha / the Mokomo Dukedom over as a whole. I will have separate videos for Itarashi and Nekomamushi, because while there are lots of stuff that is the same for both of them, there are stuff that is different in regards to, how their interactions go with certain people, or certain situations, for like what happens for the breakdown of during the Battle of Onigashima for later on. And then I will have, of course, a video about Carrot. I was debating on waiting to do a video about Carrot after we got to that point where after I was done with Wano, but I'm just like, nah, I'll just do her here. Do the Carrot thing here as well while I'm doing all the Mokomo Dukedom stuff, and then later on, if we end up getting more information about what's been going on at Zoe with Carrot or whatever, then I can always mark that down and do another video about that for like updating that information. So that's what I have for this. I thank you for watching. Oh sure, now you move. Yeah, now you move. She's like, well, you're done, aren't you? So, you're also stuffed up, Mommy. Yeah, I'm stuffed up. So, that's what I have. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!